Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. 3 years have passed since the war, and team number 7 is already 20 years old. Naruto and Sasuke went to NBU, which did not interfere with their characters. On the contrary, Uchiha became more sociable, and Uzumaki was more cheerful in some ways. Simply put, these two created a complete mess in the village, and Sakura, who was with them at first and then went to work in the hospital, helped them. Uchiha improved under Naruto's influence. Besides, they became friends and understood each other not just from half a word, but from half a glance. What can we say about Sasuke's chuckles, and Naruto's one out-of-place word? Uzumaki and Anbiyu became more serious, collected, and cunning. Which, however, did not prevent him from still being stupid and joking sometimes. And the cunning, now smarter Naruto came up with more cheerful plans, and the Sharingan Rinnegan Sasuke was with him. They, if you count Sakura, were called the Trinity. Nobody knew that Kurama was all tales, for, and helped them, of the cheerful. And they often added Saya to the last word. That's why people in the villages turned pale or shuddered as soon as they saw the well-known couple. And when Sakura was with them, often the three would gather at Naruto's or Sasuke's house, and buy a bunch of their favorite food, which was limited to ramen, tomatoes, and apples, and chat/have fun/play around/eat/watch/joke, etc. That's what happened this time too. Kakashi gave Uzumaki and Uchiha a vacation, so the Trinity decided to take a break together. They went to the store, bought 20 kilograms of apples and tomatoes, 30 packs of ramen. And fell. Well, who knew there was a stone there? Commentary on Chapter 1 Prologue. The prologue is short, but I'll try to make the chapters longer later. Grinning face with sweat. Sorry for the mistakes and thanks for your support. /./ == Chapter 2 Beginning and Distribution == Morning, the sun is just rising and painting the village and its surroundings in a pink-orange color, which will later become light yellow. It is still cool outside, sometimes a light breeze blows, rustling the leaves of the trees and driving pink clouds from the just appearing rays. On the mountain with 4 faces of great people sits a 13-year-old boy with golden hair, namely, on the head of the 4th. Catching a refreshing gust of wind with his face, he took a deep breath and slowly exhaled, after which he rose from his usual place and, going up to one of the nearby trees, hit it with his favorite technique. A moment later, the blue ball in the boy's hand completely evaporated, and the tree collapsed with a small crack. Exhaling once more, the boy hurried to retreat, or rather, to go to his friend. On the way he met a guy of the same age, with black hair and the same black eyes, in which only friends could discern, behind the veil of indifference, the words that described the situation so well. Life is pain. Having given each other 5, without stopping, they went about their business, the brunette to the mountain, the blonde to the training ground. The black-haired man, having created a chirping blue technique, repeated after his friend, knocking down a couple of trees, after which he hurried to disappear from the scene of the crime. How good that no one was watching them and saw anything. There was nothing on the training ground. Nothing but a bunch of holes and craters, and a 13-year-old girl standing alone somewhere in the middle of it all. No one would have thought that she had done all this, if not for her furious gaze and heavy, ragged breathing. 2 boys, the blonde and brunette we already know, stood at the edge of the training ground, not daring to interfere. Although, you can't call it a training ground. No, that's not it. There is nothing left to call a training ground, because all that is left of it is crumpled earth and a completely destroyed forest, 300 meters away on each side of the former clearing. The blonde swallowed. It seemed he understood that he shouldn't irritate his battle girlfriend for another 6 to 7 hours. Apparently, his friend's slightly pale face said that he understood it too. Finally, the girl calmed down and smiled affably at the guys. Needless to say, the Trinity of the Joyful, and that was it, hurried to retreat, and a couple of hours later some shinobi, on the personal order of the 3rd, were inspecting the area. Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto, and Kurama with him, ended up in the past on the day of the distribution into teams. The stone was not ordinary, but magical. The fox called it the relic of Rikudo. But neither he nor the 7th team could say how this relic ended up on the road. But they did not bother about it for long. At first, the guys began to be a little depressed, but Kurama, who was no less afraid of the angry Sakura than his Jinchuriki, hastened to point out the advantages of their journey, namely, 1. They can change the past, and prevent many people from dying. Naruto desperately wanted to save Jiraiya and Neji, and at the same time Nagato, Konan and Obito, and Sasuke was obsessed with his brother again. Only now he didn't want to kill Itachi, but to save him. And this somehow reminded Naruto of Itachi himself, but he tactfully kept silent. 2. Their powers were with them in eyes, and modes, and Byakugo. Only Naruto's fox cage closed again, but nature, which he created at Kurama's request back in the past future, remained in his subconscious, and he could open it, the cage, at any time. Kurama mercifully suggested to his Jinchuriki that he could see his parents again, and he could wait a couple of weeks it's warm to sleep, and that's good. 3. In the end, they're older now, so you can have a blast. Have fun and watch others' reactions. And a funny reaction at that. The depression lifted instantly, and the 3 now children only had to let off steam, which, in fact, they did. Naruto sat there and burned the paper with a look as if he wanted to scold her as his ANBU subordinate. But this look was noticed only by his former future teammates. Something happened? Sasuke looked at Uzumaki with a worried look, asking a silent question. He only shook his head and instantly became cheerful. Ino sat pouting and glaring at Sakura, who had conveniently sat down next to Sasuke-kun. Haruno herself was resting between the boys. Still, even though they had changed. Tope. Dobe. Tope. Dobe. Ramen. Tomatoes. Ramen. Tomatoes. And it came to a fight, so much so that only the newly resurrected Jubi, Madara, Zetsu and Kagaya, or Haruno Sakura could separate them. And this was oh so problematic, because they could start arguing at any second, and after calming blows to the head, again in 10 minutes. And it was for this very reason that Sakura sat between her friends, who silently glared at each other with a competitive look. And Naruto happily understood that that incident with Sasuke would not happen again, referring to their accidental kiss. Uchiha's thoughts were similar. Everyone was eagerly awaiting Iruka's arrival, some out of excitement, and some in order to quickly get away, eating ramen, tomatoes and apples, thinking up how to mock the past future sensei. And team number 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke. Captain, Kakashi Hatake, Yumino finished his speech, and Naruto was beaming. Like the sun. Sasuke was looking at Uzumaki with anticipation, knowing that he had come up with something, and Sakura was sitting there, pleased as a cat that had eaten sour cream, and a plan was already being made in her head about what kind of animal to catch in the forest of death and dissect. This habit, or rather mania, she got from Orochimaru. Once Sakura was sent to the snake's Sannin with an errand to bring a scroll, and the snake continued his experiments. The girl became interested, and began to observe, then help, became his student. And adopted several habits, and not only. No, she did not become obsessed with experiments, but she liked to study and dissect. Perhaps that is why Orochimaru loved her so much as a student. And this was also another reason why Haruno began to fear Sasuke. Naruto was sitting on the desk, whistling some tune and swinging his legs. Sasuke was looking at the door with strange feelings. Or rather at the Fuin, the trap that Uzumaki had cleverly set, and at the same time he was sitting on the windowsill, near the open window that, accidentally, was opposite the door. Sakura had already resigned herself to the fact that neither Naruto nor Sasuke would be able to be dragged from their seats, so she was rocking on her chair, eating an apple, one of many that she had taken with her, and anticipating the face, and in general, of Sensei. Or rather, Sensei's clone, but he was Shadow. It would be nice to tease him anyway. Sasuke nervously pulled a tomato out of his bosom and, biting into it with his teeth like some kind of vampire, began to suck out the juice with pleasure, trying to calm, if not his shattered nerves, then at least himself, and distract himself from the future picture. The floorboards creaked. Naruto perked up, and with a sadistic grin, looked at the chalk brush that was supposed to activate the mechanism. Kakashi looked into the classroom. The brush fell. Kakashi was covered in dark green paint from the Fuin seal. Kakashi felt as if something had pushed him and he stepped into the room. Kakashi slipped. Kakashi rolled. Kakashi flew out the window, barely seeing from under his paint-stained eyelids a vampire with red eyes who was happily staring at something red. Kakashi fell. Kakashi didn't relax. Kakashi cursed. Angry as hell, Kakashi Hatake sat on the roof of the academy, looking at the three children. Kakashi Clone, who never dispersed because of Naruto, was sitting in a corner, scared and angry, trying to blend into the wall and depressed. Naruto was eating ramen. Sakura was eating an apple. Sasuke was eating a tomato. They were eating enthusiastically, completely ignoring the angry new old sensei. He doesn't know yet that the Trinity burned all his books. What does that mean? Hatake tried to say it calmly. Ftfnafit Finfei? What do you mean, sensei? Naruto said in fake surprise, slurping his noodles, not bothering to eat them later. This is a rare type of ramen. Do you understand? This was a too eloquent look at the clone. It's a clone, Senfei. Sakura explained calmly, biting into an apple. I know. So why are you drinking, sensei? Then why are you asking, sensei? Uchiha raised an eyebrow, swallowing the rest of the tomato and taking a new one. The clone dissipated. Kakashi twitched. Let's get acquainted? Naruto suggested a little too cheerfully, throwing a ramen cup towards the main gate, clearly not caring that it might fall on someone's head. Go ahead. Haruno shrugged and took another bite of the apple. Sasuke didn't say anything, but you could see approval in his eyes. Kakashi tried to hide his emotions, and adopting an indifferent look, just nodded. Well, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen, fuin, family and fun. I don't like wars and a bad reaction to jokes. I can't stand tomatoes and apples. Hobbies mischief and training. The goal is to make friends with all the Biju. Dream to become Hokage. The last two sentences confused Kakashi the most. Maybe the boy got it mixed up, and the goal is to become Hokage, and the dream is to make friends with the Biju. I thought about Sasuke's canon words. As I understand it, a dream is something unrealistic, something that you really want and can achieve, but with great effort or with a small chance of it. A goal is something that you definitely want to achieve, and it is quite possible if you persistently go towards it. Looking at the blonde, who clearly hadn't mixed anything up and wasn't planning on going back on his words, Hatake casually thought. Crazy. Uchiha Sasuke. I like tomatoes, loved ones and fun. I don't like those who bother me in wars. I can't stand ramen and apples. Hobbies revenge and training. The goal is to take over the world and become the ruler of Tomato City. Dream to become a traveler. Kakashi saw the same conviction that he said everything correctly as Naruto. Genjutsu? No, he would understand. Crazy, slipped out again. I am Haruno Sakura. I love apples, loved ones, dissecting and studying. I don't like wars and when people interfere with me. I can't stand ramen, tomatoes are bearable. Hobby dissecting, studying and training. Goal dissecting everything in the world, especially resurrected ones. Dream to become a medical ninja, crazy, a persistent thought visited the Jonin's head again. Now Hatake desperately hoped that the team would fail the test, but given the well-coordinated installation of the trap, the same ignoring, the chances of their defeat were rapidly approaching zero. He urgently needed to distract himself and read. Stop. Where is my book? A loud cry resounded throughout the entire area, while the Merry Trinity hastily retreated from the roof, scattering the remaining ashes of the infamous perverted book of Come, to the wind. There were 5 people in the Hokage's office: the Hokage himself, a mad-as-hell Kakashi Hatake, a very rumpled Naruto Uzumaki, an equally rumpled Sasuke Uchiha, and an almost unrumpled Sakura Haruno. Sakura recovered quite quickly due to her abilities, Naruto due to his personal schizophrenia, but Sasuke just rubbed his bumps and looked sideways at his bruises and black eye. Who knew that the future 6th could get so angry because of some books? Hokage-sama, I sincerely ask you to show mercy to me, and punish these, with particular cruelty. The joyful Trinity, Naruto prompted matter-of-factly. After all, everything on him was healing right before our eyes. There was a scar no more, there was a bruise no more. Here. What? Kakashi stared at the not yet student in confusion. Well, we are the Trinity of the Joyful, and it is already barely audible. Saya. And what did they do, Kakashi? The Hokage was genuinely interested. After all, Hatake is not so easy to get angry. And here the list of facts began, starting with the brush that fell on his head and the clone in depression, which in itself was already surprising, ending with a strange acquaintance, and the ashes that flew away, which used to be a favorite book. Hiruzen was incredibly happy about the last one, but he didn't show it, and pretended to shake his head. I'll punish them only if they become a team under your command, he said, as if cutting off. The trio shuddered a little. They would definitely pass. Hatake had mixed feelings. He wanted to punish the imps, but he wanted more not to take the team, and especially these three. Struggling with himself, Hatake belatedly nodded, after which the future team, with Sarutobi's permission, left the office. In the corridor, Kakashi managed to tell about the survival exam and warn about what not to do, told them not to be late, after which he quickly ran off to the bookstore. He never heard Sakura's words about the punishment that awaited him in case of being late. The cheerful ones exchanged 2 sly glances, after which they went to Uzumaki. The day ruined by adventures, or rather the evening and night, must be replaced. Today will be fun. So the guys thought. And the people in the village sleep too well, not suspecting that in one moment their quiet days will sink into oblivion. The morning starts well. With screams of terror, curses of rage, shouts of despair, and the Hokage stopping by for tea. Or rather, it was only for the joyful three. The night was calm, until the moment when Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto, with Kurama rubbing his paws, under the cover of night, with blinding darkness and ringing silence for company, set out from the house. Hello, old man third! Naruto smiled unusually, letting the guest into the house. HMN. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? Sasuke calmly sipped his tea, relaxing with his eyes closed. I agree, nodded Sakura, who sat down on the nightstand and ate an apple. Amazing! Uzumaki responded without a drop of sarcasm. Sarutobi stood there for a few seconds in shock, thinking, do they understand Uchiha's chuckles? But quickly pulled himself together and got down to business. Naruto, how do you explain this? What do you mean? He decided to play the fool. What you did, Hiruzen explained calmly. What have we done? He continued to press his point. You know yourself what? No. Honest, uncomprehending eyes. So you want to say that it wasn't you who painted the houses? And the Hokage's painted faces weren't your doing? I'm not even mentioning Hataki's hair dyed green and Might's hair dyed white, which contributed to Rock Lee's hair being dyed white. The painted faces of Kotetsu and Izumo, as well as Jiraiya, who was taken from an unknown place, Tsunade, who was dead drunk, and Orochimaru, who was trying to get to his lab, cursing the whole world, tied up with one rope. The Sanins immediately ran away after their release, fleeing from the Hokage, who was fired up with the idea of renewing their team. You want to say that it wasn't you who did this? We, Naruto answered modestly, looking down. But we have done almost nothing. At these words, the Hokage fell into a specific stupor. The joyful trinity can even drive the Tsuchikage to suicide. Now the Hokage was flying in some kind of prostration, because the meaning of the words did not want to reach his brain at all, and the roof had long since flown to the south, saving the poor third from a prematurely broken psyche. Hiruzen Sarutobi could easily say that his logic was completely broken, because Naruto's answers were driving him crazy. And his shouts in the middle of the story like, ramen, or, my red fur coat ya, had long since lost their meaning, and the body reacted only with a shudder, and the approving chuckles of the Uchiha and the cute smile of Haruno, which could easily be called a grin, only made common sense wave its hand and hastily retreat. The mind from the very beginning lost the thread of the conversation and desperately tried to understand the meaning of the words spoken, because it was difficult to call them sentences. Having decided that it would be too much trouble to pester him with questions and punishments for what he had done that night, and in the morning, the Hokage hurried to his residence. Order had to be restored. Hiruzen had somehow forgotten that children's behavior was fundamentally different. But does it matter when you were almost driven crazy? And on the mountain with the Hokage faces, Above these very faces hung a large poster. The Trinity of the Joyful. Sorry, a black cat is in the way. Only now did Hataki deign to look away from the newly acquired book, and to his shock and horror, he realized that there was no one else on the training ground except himself. It couldn't be like that. They were always waiting for him. He always appeared before people. And it didn't matter at all what emotions those waiting were experiencing: anger, fury, indifference, hatred, irritation. They were always waiting for him. But now there was only emptiness in front of Kakashi, forcing him to open his eyes in shock and start reviewing all the options for the cause of that very emptiness. Have they already left? Or haven't arrived yet? A few seconds later, 3 genin fell into the clearing, thereby stopping Kakashi's flow of thoughts, after which, lining up neatly in a row, they looked expectantly at the jounin. And where were you? Hataki asked irritably. Still, this was the only time, if you don't count childhood, when it wasn't he who was late, but Abitodobe, when a question was asked not to him, but to someone else. Sorry, sensei, I just found a kitten in a tree and was helping it get down, Sakura mumbled guiltily. And then I went down the road and met Sasuke. I helped an old granny cross the road and carry her bags, after which we went to the training ground, meeting Naruto. Uchiha continued the relay, speaking in a sad voice. And after that we saw a black cat crossing the road. Of course, we desperately tried to make it before it completely crossed the road, but it didn't work out. So we had to go around the village, Naruto continued, sniffling sadly. We got lost on the road of life, sensei. Trinity finished his justification plaintively, in unison, after which they turned their sad eyes to the dumbfounded no longer blonde. Of course, after all, no one had ever justified themselves to him with his own excuses. Okay, now I'm going to give you the survival exam. Hataki came to his senses. You'll have 3 hours to pass it, otherwise you'll go to the academy. You need to take these bells from me. Hataki was unconscious and tied to a tree stump with a fishing line, while the genin were smiling happily, rubbing their hands and sitting right on the ground, doing whatever they wanted. Sasuke and Sakura were chatting about their own things, ignoring Uzumaki's presence, and Naruto, giggling nastily, was reading Jiraiya's book that he had taken from Kakashi. You passed, mumbled the copy ninja, only coming to his senses and desperately trying to get out of the forest. And he so wanted to take revenge on the imps for the green hair. Well, now he is a living example of the fact that revenge is not the solution. And in this case, it is a hopeless matter. The 3 looked at each other and stood up, walking to Naruto's house, cheerfully discussing what they would do. And Hataki looked at the departing students, unable to free himself, sadly following the book. An angry and slightly discouraged Hataki Kakashi appeared before the Hokage. So, are the kids okay? Hiruzen began immediately. In full, the copyist hissed angrily. Only now did Sarutobi notice that the Jonin was badly battered. How did you get this? Oh, they are monsters. Even with the Sharingan, I couldn't resist much. In the end, they knocked me out and tied me to a log. With a very strong fishing line. I only got free half an hour ago. And the worst thing is that Uzumaki took my book. And he giggled nastily. Terrible, agreed the third. But unlike Kakashi, he was worried about Naruto becoming a pervert, not about Hataki losing the book. He was even genuinely happy about the latter. Outrageous! Junin nodded indignantly. They must be punished. They themselves would punish anyone, muttered the Hokage, looking at the now green-haired and too rumpled Kakashi, with a stupid and nervous giggle, and also with a slight shudder recalling the conversation with the Trinity. Now Hiruzen is not sure that he is mentally healthy, because the reaction of the body spoke too significantly. Hataki, who heard the monologue of the third and his reaction, frowned. An unobtrusive thought crept into his head. Did they really bring the Hokage too? In general, Kakashi, Sarutobi continued in a normal tone. Let's see their teamwork, and if everything is good, I will give them a C-rank mission. Kakashi nodded and with the Hokage's permission, disappeared. To buy a new book. Well, what are we going to do, Naruto? Sakura asked, sitting on the table in Uzumaki's apartment, and happily biting into an apple. HMN. I hope you're not going to do what you told the third about the Tsuchikage? Sasuke, sitting on the windowsill, elegantly arched an eyebrow, rubbing a new tomato on his t-shirt. No. I think we'll do a couple of jokes while we're doing D-rank, and when everyone forgets about us, the blonde drawled meaningfully, smiling predatorily and looking impatiently at the brewing ramen. He already said that he can't stand waiting for these tedious 3 minutes. Cats. And the bomb lying somewhere in the corner of the room exploded, showering everything possible and impossible with confetti. Are you sure you haven't talked to Deidara? Uchiha drawled doubtfully. Or maybe he's your brother? Or maybe all blondes are brothers. Now you remind me of that guy from Cloud, with his eternal, what if? Only with you it's maybe. Naruto was a little offended. Are you sure you're not brothers? Do you doubt that I'm an Uchiha? The brunette bristled. Same question, do you doubt that I am Uzumaki? The blue-eyed man raised an eyebrow. The beginning quarrel was stopped by Sakura, who did not hide her strength, and therefore hit the guys with all her might on their long-suffering heads. Hi, the boys said in unison, instantly responding to the warning hanging in the air. Well, that's good. Haruno clapped her hands joyfully, and sitting down in her usual place, she returned to eating her favorite fruit. By the way, Naruto, your ramen is brewed. Really? The blonde with stars in his eyes pounced on the food, instantly forgetting the quarrel, as did Sasuke, who had returned to eating the tomato. Still, such skirmishes happened quite often. No, not even that. Every day, at least once, so there was no point in sulking. Well, that's good. Haruno smiled. They weren't just teammates or friends now. They were. D-rank were boring missions, hated by all genin. Team number 7 also hated these missions, but kept quiet. Sometimes something just accidentally fell, spilled, broke. So, mere trifles. Sometimes Kakashi, who was peacefully reading a book, would be hit by jars, earth, children. The latter, glory to Kami, only applied to Naruto and Sasuke, whom Sakura would not hesitate to beat for their indecent behavior. A couple of times even a fireball flew in, from Sasuke, who decided to experiment on the river. Just by chance. And it doesn't matter that the river is on the opposite side, it was Uchiha who pushed Naruto. Yes, that's right. But all this was done by clones, and the originals did what they wanted, but mostly sat at Uzumaki's house. The workers did not disperse, because this was a new kind of clone invented by Naruto. Simply put, fill up with more chakra, attach a few in, and even the Byakugan and Sharingan will not tell the difference. And so, Naruto, eating ramen, remembered Kurama's cage and his parents. Indeed. Why not? An hour later, Naruto was not far from Konoha, behind a bunch of barriers and under the supervision of Sakura and Sasuke. Good luck! Haruno smiled. Uchiha only raised the corners of his lips and chuckled encouragingly. Uzumaki went into his subconscious. Ku, are you ready? Yes, small. The seal gave way easily. Someone caught the blonde by the hand and threw him to the floor. The fourth, who was about to say something, froze in surprise, because there was one more being present in the subconscious. Sasuke? What are you doing here? Naruto was also shocked to the depths of his soul. I wanted to see the fourth in person. Uchiha tried to make an excuse. Team, you've already seen him. A skeptical and surprisingly calm voice. I wanted more. Seriously? Naruto showed skepticism with all his appearance. Justification? Why not? Indeed, the skepticism did not disappear, but indignation appeared. And in general, get out of here! Why is that? This is my subconscious. Consider me your guest. Sasuke walked through the bars of the cage. Hello, Blowcastic. Have you gone too far, red-eyed bastard? Kurama asked lazily. No more than usual. Uchiha had already sat down on the tailed beast's paw. And what, Sasuke Kurama tolerates. He began to tolerate, after their joint jokes. And now they are good friends. Not without teasing, of course, but no longer offensive. Indeed, the fox grinned, without opening his eyes, and still lying in a sleeping position. Do you have any tea? This time Uchiha looked at Naruto, who was standing there, indignant and angry. The fourth one slightly lost his temper. His wife, who also appeared, but did not attract attention, stood nearby. Don't you want some tomatoes? Naruto snapped. Is there one? Uchiha's eyes shone with hope, just like a small child's. Yes, he snorted importantly. Where? In the real world. Destroyed hopes. Eh? I don't play like that. Sasuke pouted like a little child and turned away. And then there's Sakura-chan. Sasuke straightened up. And if you don't disappear right now, you won't be the only one who gets it. The blonde barked, instantly changing his tone. The brunette imagined the prospect that had opened up. Are we sure we hit all the dissection items? Uchiha asked cautiously. The knives are still there, Naruto said in a casual tone, watching Sasuke turn pale, blue, and green. A rare sight indeed. Bye. The Sharingan immediately reacted and disappeared. Are you scared or something? Uzumaki scratched his cheek thoughtfully. Have you seen it? It's one of the wonders of the world, the Uchiha's changing face color. 3 whole colors. And for 2 whole minutes. Kurama immediately perked up and began sharing his impressions with shining eyes. You've gone too far. Well, that's true. The blue-eyed man smiled broadly as if nothing had happened. Bijou swallowed loudly and exhaled, staring at the couple who were silent in quiet shock. Already parents. Uzumaki remembered them too and blushed a little. You know. The Ninetales' eyes gleamed mysteriously and with a spark of amusement. Seeing Uzumaki blush is much more unusual. Now the indignant exclamations of the 2 Uzumaki merged into one, accompanied by the loud laughter of the fox. Naruto returned to reality extremely happy. He chatted with his parents, told them about himself in general terms, and in particular about his past life. They all laughed, and were sad, and cried. Minato also shed a few tears from the pride he felt for his son, the sadness and sorrow that he was not there with him, and the happiness of the moment, because their whole family was together. Kurama also shed tears, although he stoically tried not to show it. After all, he and Naruto are like brothers. Overall, Uzumaki was incredibly happy, and even the presence of the Uchiha at the very beginning did not spoil the mood at all. Home? Sakura smiled, infected by her friend's happy aura. Home. Naruto nodded, realizing that the part of him that wanted to spend time with his parents looked with black envy at happy families and therefore was shoved deep into the depths of his heart, disappeared, or rather healed, and became bright. Home. Sasuke chuckled cheerfully. Now there are 3 of them. Although not related by blood, they are a strong and reliable family. Naruto lazily opened his eyes, yawned heartbreakingly, and looked around. Everything was as usual. The blanket had almost completely slid to the floor, clothes were scattered all over the apartment, there was a lot of trash everywhere, the furniture had undergone an unplanned rearrangement, the dishes had not been washed. Suddenly, a strange rustling sound came from the kitchen. Turning his gaze to the source of the sound, Uzumaki realized that it was Sakura, who had been sleeping peacefully on the table, curled up, almost falling, but managed to hook her fingers onto the edge of the table, pulled herself up without even waking up. Unfortunately, this did not save the dishes. Naruto sadly watched the glass he didn't really like fall, which eventually turned into a pile of shards, and winced a little at the unpleasant sound. However, Sakura wasn't bothered by it at all, and she continued to snore peacefully. This is where Uzumaki's brain failed. Why, exactly, was Sakura sleeping on the table? His memory was silent, like a prisoner being interrogated, and so the blonde had to rack his brains. So what's the last thing he remembers? I think. Yes. That's right, he and Kurama had a fight. Yeah, and it seems like they got drunk, all 4 of them. And they got drunk not only because of the fight, but also because of the successfully completed mission. Although here, perhaps, it's worth starting with even earlier memories. It all started the day after Naruto met his parents. It was then discovered that Kurama could now exit his Jinchuriki seal, but only in his mini form, similar in size to a cat. The distance between the fox and the Jinchuriki seemed to be unlimited, but the Bijou mode was. Kurama came out of the seal and Naruto could only use the chakra that was left in him. When the fox's chakra was completely spent, only Kurama could restore it, and only in the seal. However, this did not darken the mood. Soon they were finally given that very cherished C-rank mission. Of course, Uzumaki couldn't do without it. He pestered the 3rd every minute, at the first opportunity, and considering that his teammates had also joined, Hiruzen had only two choices: either he would agree, or the kids would finally drive the poor old man crazy. Sarutobi valued his nerves and decided that it was better to give the genin what they wanted, especially since he himself had promised their captain something similar. Team 7 had exceeded all their expectations, and not only had completed the mission almost perfectly, but had also helped several individuals. Naruto had once again subjected Inari and Tazuna to his magic therapy. The team had helped finish the bridge a little faster, and most importantly in their opinion, they had managed to save Zabuza and Haku. The latter had been done in secret from Kakashi, so to the world, the two were dead. Uzumaki himself seemed to be happier than the rescued ones. And yet in the past, he still blamed himself for the deaths of the swordsman and his partner. And so, a few days after returning to Konoha, Kurama and Naruto had a fight. Somehow, the squabble touched on the topic of alcohol, and then they argued altogether. An excuse for the desired drinking bout was quickly found: the successful completion of the mission, the rescue of Zabuza and Haku, Kurama's new ability, and Naruto's meeting with his parents. There's no need to even remember the results. A long scream was heard outside the window, followed by a group of people shouting in response. Naruto winced again and felt an unprecedented desire to give these smart guys a good beating, even despite his body not obeying him at all. There was a muffled thud and a furious hiss under the bed. That meant someone had hit their head on that very bed. And judging by the fact that Sakura was sleeping in the kitchen, Kurama was in the seal, and none of the outsiders were involved in the drinking, that meant that it was. A black something rolled out from under the bed like a sausage. Sasuke! Bingo! However, this something rolled back almost immediately. The sunlight hit the eyes accustomed to the darkness sharply. After 10 seconds, the head nevertheless stuck out into the light, and then the whole body rolled out again. As a sausage. Naruto was finally able to look at his friend and couldn't hold back a hysterical laugh. The Uchiha raised his eyes full of menace, but the effect was the opposite. Still sleepy, with chubby cheeks and slightly protruding lips, a creative mess on his head and in wrinkled clothes, Sasuke created a cute impression, and the threat on his childishly chubby face only added to the kawaiiness. The blonde giggled again, under the dying squeals of Kurama, who burst into loud laughter, more like a hysterical fit. The fox fell silent, and Uzumaki wanted to go check the subconscious for the presence of a corpse. But no, Kurama took a deep breath and cackled again, shaking the walls. Uchiha, looking at his friend, also couldn't hold back a chuckle, similar to a cheerful snort. But it's impossible to fool Naruto. He knows Sasuke like himself, and therefore immediately correctly understood the reaction. And he probably didn't look any better than Uchiha. Naruto frowned, glaring at Sasuke, while the brunette glared at Uzumaki. It could have come to blows again, except that Sakura had fallen into their plans. And literally fallen, only not into their plans, but onto the floor. The boys shuddered and looked at Haruno, who blinked in confusion. She looked at the calendar in her hand, which had appeared out of nowhere, and then widened her eyes in surprise. She showed the calendar to her friends, pointing to what should have been today's date. Uchiha and Uzumaki first looked at the number, and then, realizing the situation, froze in shock. Kurama, who had already recovered from his recent fit, feigned bitterness and chuckled in anticipation. After all, today the first stage of the Chunin exam begins. The friends gathered rather quickly and therefore managed to make it to the exam. The Genjutsu went without attracting much attention, yet despite the cheerful nature of the Trinity, common sense sometimes prevailed, as now they will always have time to stand out, but not for the exam. It seemed that Kakashi was even upset that the guys had made it in time. However, this did not spoil the team's mood at all, and they happily burst into the door, from which Hatake barely managed to jump back. The genin gathered in the room noted the team with the naive and dumb blonde, the gloomy brunette, and the self-confident girl as an easy target, but the jonin watching the children and not only swallowed nervously, recognizing the main instigators of the disasters, proudly called jokes, in Konoha. Sasuke-kun! I knew you would come! Ino, like the other genin of this issue, clearly did not know what exactly Team 7 was doing, and therefore naively believed in the radiance of the Uchiha's existence. The representative of the said clan proudly ignored Yamanaka and furtively looked around the room with only his eyes, pulled a tomato out of his bosom. Sakura only snorted at her friend's attempts to attract Sasuke's attention, shamelessly taking out an apple and biting into it with pleasure. Naruto pouted indignantly. He brought ramen, but there was no water. Kurama only chuckled mockingly at the blonde's stupidity, to which he received a caustic response. The rest were not bothered by Uzumaki's face frozen in a strange, incomprehensible expression. They simply firmly assured themselves that this was a manifestation of the blonde's maximum intelligence. His teammates simply ignored the mental battles of Fox and Naruto, completely absorbed in their favorite food. "Hey, newbies!" A strange, bespectacled man approached the teams. "Behave a little quieter and look around." Everyone except Naruto, who had fallen out of the world, and Sasuke and Sakura, who were absorbed in the exciting eating of a fruit and vegetable, looked around and swallowed a little nervously from the burning glances. Having waited for the children's attention to his person, Kabuto, and it was he, continued. "My name is Yukoshi Kabuto, and this is not my first time taking the exam. Well, I can help you, newbies. After all, we are from the same village. Sasuke-kun. Look, now we'll definitely pass the exam. Kabuto-san promised to help us." Help? Uchiha glanced at Yakushi with a little interest. And it was this moment that Naruto chose to finally listen to the conversation. "Oh. Kabuto-san, Kabuto-san. Do you have water? I really wanted ramen." "In water?" The spy was stunned. "Well, yes, water." Uzumaki rattled off and nodded with shining eyes like a Chinese bobblehead, but seeing the same stupor on Yakushi's face, he took pity. "Boiled water." Boiled. Ah. Orochimaru's assistant finally realized what Naruto was asking for, and he again stared at the blonde in surprise. "Why do you need boiled water? This is S+ class secret information, known only to the very top of the village. He just wants to make himself some ramen." Sakura gave in completely, lazily tearing herself away from the apple. The genin who had been listening, thinking that they would get Konoha's secret information, breathed out in surprise and disappointment. Some were let down by their bodies, with a twitching eyebrow or eyelid. Yes. Naruto didn't resist the facts and nodded impatiently a couple of times, staring at Kabuto again. "So do you have boiled water?" And no, but the confused Kabuto tried to take control of the situation again, but it was going really badly. "You dash," Uzumaki drawled, completely disappointed, instantly frowning. "Liar! And they said that you have everything." "Ahem. I didn't say that, nothing could hurt, but it doesn't matter." Naruto waved his hand in disappointment, and almost burst into tears from the destroyed hope, continuing in a whiny voice, under the open laughter of Kurama in his head. "The main thing is that there is no water. But I have information about all the participants of the exam. I can share it. There is no water." Kabuto looked at the retreating hunched figure with confusion and turned his gaze to the equally confused teenagers, then to Sasuke, who looked at the spy with disdain, chuckled, and turned around proudly followed his friend. Sakura mirrored the Uchiha's actions, with the only difference, instead of there was "Pff. Sorry, Orochimaru-sama, but it seems I failed your task. Next time, I must take into account the mistake and correct it. Take boiled water with me." Team 7 naturally slept through almost the entire first stage, scribbling something on some pieces of paper for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and Naruto drew a more or less recognizable picture of himself the Great, Uchiha Majesty, Sakura the Magnificent, and Kurama, who was actively pestering him, with a Panama hat on his head and a clown nose, in the name of revenge. Still, the recent drinking had taken its toll on the young organisms. Their bodies were young, and even despite Sakura's healing techniques, there were consequences, for example excessive drowsiness. And because Kurama had gotten drunk, he couldn't rid Naruto of these sensations. The examiner and the guards, having heard about the joyful trinity, did not dare to touch the children, so as not to incur their wrath. Having stoically endured the end with the use of mental pressure, they wanted to sleep terribly. But they couldn't offend the person, could they? And then the overly loud Mitarashi Anko, the examiner of the second stage, the guys were able to go home to Uzumaki and get a good night's sleep. The second stage is coming soon. The main thing is not to oversleep. indifference, trembling, fear for life, and joy. This is exactly what the genin who had passed the second stage of the Chunin exams who had gathered in a certain place were experiencing. While Enko was going on and scaring everyone, the infamous Mary Trinity stood a little further away from the main group and choked on silent laughter. Although, judging by the looks that the gathered people were throwing at the three strange genin who were shaking and making strange sounds, it wasn't so silent. They had nothing to fear. Sakura had recently been going into the forest frequently to get animals for her experiments, and now all the animals were scared of her as if she were cursed, and that didn't take into account the powers of the Trinity. Orochimaru also glanced at them a couple of times, or rather at Sasuke, but neither Uchiha nor even Uzumaki paid attention to it. But the third representative of their team, a strange girl, almost devoured Sannin with her gaze, and her gaze was admiringly loving. Orochimaru, who had already turned away, was greatly strained by the persistent gaze, but fortunately Uchiha distracted the girl, and one of the legendary Trinity sighed more or less calmly. And now, finally, the mockery of the psyche of the unlucky genin is over. It's time to take the scroll and go to the gate. Lucky! Naruto's joyful voice. Indeed, Sasuke. Aha! Sakura beamed with happiness. Like sunshine, not only did they collect a bunch of animals, find several rare plants, but they also stumbled upon an apple tree. As soon as the start was given, the Trinity began to carry out their plan, and they were really lucky. They almost immediately found a rather weak team with the scroll they needed. In half an hour they came across the sand team and successfully set everyone's brains straight. Temari, Kenkuro, Gaara, and even Shikaku. Naruto personally dealt with the last two, so the result was 100% positive. And now the penultimate point remained to meet Orochimaru, and what would happen next, no one could say for sure, mainly because of Sannin's almost unpredictable reaction, as well as because of Sakura, who was a fan of him, Orochimaru. Do you think they will last much longer? Considering that when we left, both Sakura and, surprisingly, Orochimaru had shining eyes. Well, it looks like we're here for a long time. Agreed, a completely fallen voice. And an envious look at the tomato, because Naruto still has the same problem, not a drop of boiled water in. Oh, okay. There's a river 25 meters away. Did it finally get through? Kurama, so you knew? The eloquent silence gave away the fox's thoughts about the mental abilities of his Jinchuriki. And then a loud laugh rang out throughout the entire subconscious. It's a pleasure to do business with you, SS Sakura-chan. Orochimaru hissed somewhat enthusiastically. And me with you, sensei. Haruno was still glowing. During all that time, they managed to show their developments and discoveries to each other. Tell each other about their immediate plans regarding science, agree on mutual assistance. Trinity took and tested Sannin's rather harmless experiments in Konoha, and he gave them to them, and once again tied themselves with the bonds of beloved teacher and student. Uchiha chuckled softly and jealously, as he bit into a tomato. My ramen! And Naruto sat on his haunches to the side and traced his finger along the ground, shedding tears. The water he had boiled was only enough for 2 servings of ramen. And now, alas, he either had to wait another half hour for the kettle to boil, which was no longer possible, because they would soon leave, or wait until they came to the tower. And that was a long time. And now to the tower! Sakura said happily after saying goodbye to her sensei, and smiling, she took out an apple, mercilessly not noticing Uzumaki, who had started whining again. You passed. Now you will wait for other participants for 4 more days. Leaving the tower is prohibited. Break the rule, disqualification. The Trinity was left alone in the room. Do as you wish, but I'm going to Kabuto. He probably has boiled water, Naruto said impatiently. His teammates didn't say anything about the fact that if Yakushi didn't have water in the first stage, he probably wouldn't have it now. Who knows, maybe he will. Especially since Uzumaki, if he got something into his head, can't be stopped. Orochimaru-sama, I learned from my mistakes and stocked up on boiled water. Now I won't let you down. Kabuto looked at the infinitely happy Naruto eating ramen with stars in his eyes. Genins, the Hokage began, and almost choked from Naruto's piercing gaze. He was distracted from eating ramen, and if Sasuke and Sakura could freely eat their favorite food right now, and that's exactly what they were doing, then you can't take ramen with you here. Ahem. Ahem. In general, you have passed the second stage of the Chunin exam. The third stage will be a battle between the participants. The details will be told to you in a month. That's when the stage will begin. Therefore, you have a month to rest and become stronger in order to pass it. The speech, which was supposed to last half an hour, had to be urgently cut short. You never know what these three, led by the offended Uzumaki, will do. Soon, a happy cry was heard throughout Konoha. Ramen, wait for me. The boys had no special plans for the coming month, just to continue to drive the villagers, the arriving guests, and the long-suffering Hokage to nervous tics. Although, a couple of days later Naruto remembered one particular pervert and headed to the hot springs in order to make him his teacher. "Oh you! Pervert! Pervert! Come here!" These were the exact cries that could be heard at the hot springs now, which is what Naruto did, watching this from under the water with satisfaction, sticking out only the top of his head. He certainly saw how the ladies chased Sannin and tried to beat him, which, by the way, they always succeeded in doing. Only Naruto always got it, as he was always next to the sensei, and then ran away with him. No, Naruto loved Jiraiya like a grandfather or even a father, which was not far from the truth. Sannin may be the godfather, but he is still a father. But he really got on his nerves, constantly taking his money and dragging him along to the baths. Uzumaki also couldn't help but highlight their first meeting. Then he chased the pervert and begged him to become his teacher, and he constantly ran away. So why shouldn't Jiraiya run after Naruto now? "Come here, you little bastard!" Now the poor residents were watching the game of catch-up of one of the Sannin Trinity and, as of recently, one of the main headaches in Konoha, the nickname, Demon, had faded and acquired a slightly different meaning, which, by the way, everyone without exception agreed with. Well, except for the amusing Trinity, because they simply ignored it and did not really listen to the conversations of others. "Hokage-sama there." The ANBU faltered, seeing Hiruzen, who was sorting through papers with a poker face, or, more accurately, a lack of concern. "Jiraiya-san, and—" "Wait!" The ANBU fell silent. "Does Naruto have anything to do with this?" "Yes, Hokage-sama." "Then everything is fine." And with universal peace he began to work on the documents, completely ignoring the ANBU, who had fallen into a daze. "I'm sorry, Naruto." "I'm sorry." Jiraiya was sitting somewhere in the corner of Uzumaki's apartment, and was depressed, after Naruto's therapy, on the topic of, "Why can't you leave poor little orphan boys alone?" while the culprit himself was playing cards with his teammates. Finally, victory was Naruto's, and he, happy about this, forgave Sannin. "What are you planning on doing, Naruto?" Sakura asked. "I plan to sign the contract to summon the toads, and then go and meet them again. And pretend that I learned the Rasengan and the hermit mode." Yes, Naruto, as well as Sasuke and Sakura, likes to have fun and annoy everyone, but he is by no means stupid, and I should learn the techniques again, even just for show. Then I'm going to Orochimaru-sensei. Haruno's burning eyes completely discouraged Naruto and Sasuke from arguing with her. "Ramen!" Naruto, shedding tears of happiness, ate ramen at Ichiraku at almost cosmic speed. To be honest, even Sasuke and Sakura tore themselves away from their beloved apples and tomatoes to look at their comrade in shock. Of course, they knew that Uzumaki would sell his soul for ramen, and they had seen a lot too, but "I will never let Naruto go to Maiboku again, for more than an hour," Haruno squeezed out, not taking her eyes off the blonde and biting into an apple. Sasuke silently agreed with her, unable to squeeze out even the usual HM. Naruto, not paying the slightest attention to his friends, continued to destroy his 35th bowl of ramen. And why did he take so little ramen with him to the summoning world? Uzumaki was not so saddened by the prospect of eating only bugs, as he was by not having a crumb of his favorite food. Naruto, Sakura. We seem to be a little late for the exam. Naruto mumbled sleepily, and a second later he jumped up as if scalded. "What are we doing?" The Trinity was late, fortunately, only by a couple of minutes. Unceremoniously stumbling into the stadium. Not paying attention to the numerous, all without exception, glances, they approached the other participants in deathly silence and, as if nothing had happened, took out food and began to eat it, looking at the silent Hokage with an innocent questioning look, as if this was how it should be. If it were any other team, they would have been immediately suspended, punished, and the audience would have screamed and demanded that this team be expelled from Shinobi. But no. After all, this is the Trinity that finally finished everyone off, who cannot be killed, the Jinchuriki and the last Uchiha. After all beaten, it simply won't work, but the revenge will be unforgettable, or threatened. All because of the same revenge. Everyone here managed to get it from the jokers and become their target, read guinea pig. Even the nobility did not escape this fate, and those who complained got a double portion. Others, not being completely stupid, realized that it was better to keep quiet. That's why all the spectators were now glaring at the Veseliashai with hateful glances. But they wisely kept silent, sincerely hoping, if not to kill them with a glance, then at least to cause them maximum discomfort. But the Trinity didn't give a damn about these looks, and they completely immersed themselves in eating apples tomatoes ramen. Yes. Naruto, of course, didn't take a ton of ramen with him, or even just one. He just didn't have time to boil water, they were late after all. So they had to make do with dry noodles from a purchased pack. Kurama remained silent, watching with mixed feelings as his Jinchuriki gnawed on noodles. It seemed like he wanted to laugh, because of the stupidity of the host and the situation as a whole, but it seemed like he wanted to cry all because of the same thing. As they say, if you want to eat, you have to be able to spin around. Naruto mentally shared with the tailed beast. That's not what it says, idiot. It seemed that hysterical notes crept into Fox's voice. And then Naruto listened to the monotonous banging of his head against the wall from his subconscious. The battles were surprisingly calm. Neji sincerely repented of his mistakes and his attitude towards Hinata, impressed by Naruto's speech about fate. Orochimaru in the guise of Kage was so shining, radiating kindness and positivity that the ANBU began to look at him strangely. And Hiruzen? And what about Hiruzen? After everything the Trinity had done, nothing was scary or strange to him anymore. Surprisingly, he had awakened a complete indifference to everything strange. And everyone even thought that the third had finally attained Zen. Orochimaru's joy consisted in acquiring a student, with whom he had become insanely close during this month, and in acquiring wise experimenters who pleased him with the frequent results of his, or even better, there's his and Sakura's, inventions, as well as detailed, but no less clear reports on these very results. The Trinity showed the necessary minimum, that is, they won, but on the edge of their capabilities. Ha and ha again, considering that they had thoroughly battered a strong Jonin, who was a living legend and a dangerous enemy for all the villages. The Hokage, of course, would have paid attention to this, if he had not sworn not to get involved with the Trinity and everything connected with them. And Sarutobi really didn't want to add to his headaches, so he ignored this discrepancy. Gaara hadn't gone mad. Despite all the jokes from the Trinity that seemed to stick to the Sabakuno family, the future Kazekage had finally experienced love and happiness, and therefore glowed almost worse than the snake Sannin. No less happy Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura hurried home after successfully conducted battles. Of course, you can eat there, but it is much better to do it at home, in a family atmosphere and with a small, but no less impudent red rug, proudly called Kurama. That's why I think you're right, Jiraiya. It's really time for me to rest, and the daily incidents with Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura are proof of that. So I'm giving you and Naruto a mission to return Senju Tsunade to the village. The Sannin nodded seriously, and when he left the office, he broke into a happy smile. His godson asked him for something, and now he could atone for his guilt before the boy who had already become dear to him. And Naruto sneezed, receiving a healing blow to the back from Sakura. Everything is going according to plan, said a voice in the darkness. Muhahahoho haiki. Kaka. Ka. You clearly need to work on your villainous laugh. Another voice remarked mockingly. The light suddenly turned on. What are you doing here? Sakura, who had just entered, raised an eyebrow, looking at the two guys who were sitting on the floor, having built chairs out of pillows and blankets, and were now blinking stupidly. Nothing like that, Sakura-chan. Naruto smiled, and then pouted. And anyway, you interrupted an important meeting. What kind of childishness is this? Haruno rolled her eyes, then turned them to the silent Sasuke. Okay, Naruto, but… Uchiha just chuckled, looking at the pile of tomatoes in the middle of the room, mixed with packs of ramen. Sakura just sighed in pain and hit herself on the forehead. Somewhere in a pile of clothes, a sleepy Kurama began to stir, poked his muzzle out, looked around and snorted wisely, understanding the situation. What were we discussing? Haruno finally resigned herself. I'm going with the perverted hermit to get Tsunade Bachan so she can be made Hokage. I talked him into suggesting this idea to Old Man 3, and he wouldn't mind retiring. Especially considering our activities. Take some ramen with you, Sakura advised prudently. The Uchiha chuckled cheerfully in agreement. Huh? Naruto was surprised. Is something wrong? Kurama couldn't help but laugh, disappearing into a white haze after losing his concentration. There was a knock at the door. Coming. Naruto, who had been bored until this moment, opened the door and met with a blood-red Sharingan. Sasuke, who had rushed in, eager to meet his beloved brother, opened the door and froze. Miraculously tied up, Kisame was floundering somewhere in the corner of the room, with a fish mercilessly stuffed into his mouth. Well, he couldn't eat his kinsman, close to his heart, he couldn't. And at the table, a happy Naruto and Itachi, tired of the latter's chatter, were calmly drinking tea. Nothing unusual, though, right? What happened? Sasuke asked, already bored. Well, I met your brother, and he doesn't believe that you love him. He says you want revenge, that's all love is. Well, I suggested that he wait for you, so that he could see for himself the truth of my words. And while we're waiting, why not have some tea? So we're sitting here, waiting for you. I see. The voice became more indifferent. And what is this? This? Uzumaki caught Sasuke's gaze directed at Kisame. Oh, this. This is Itachi's partner. He was a bit of a nuisance, so I tied him up. But he talked too much and was interrupting our conversation, so I gave him some food to shut up. Fish. Yes, why? And an innocent look. Oh, nothing, a mocking chuckle. Nothing. Brother, have you come to take revenge on me? There was a hidden hope for a positive answer in his voice. Sasuke only chuckled sadistically and destroyed all of his older brother's hopes. No. Sasuke and Itachi went to the village to remove the mark of traitor from the elder Uchiha, and also to release Kisame along the way. Into the water, yes. Naruto, with the returning Jiraiya, went to where Tsunade was last seen. I won't be Hokage. But… I won't, period. Naruto boredly watched the scene of the Great Sannin debate, quietly stealing a bottle of sake. Shizen with all her appearance showed her disinterest in these two people, like, they are on their own, and I was just passing by. Tun was already asleep, not paying attention to the arguing. Naruto. Uzumaki first looked strangely at the bottle, thinking that he was imagining things. But a strong blow to the head made him throw these thoughts away. Bottles can't fight. Sakura-chan. Sasuke. Orochimaru. The confused blonde looked at the three who had arrived. You should be in Konoha. Well, Orochimaru-sensei wanted to see Tsunade-sensei. I went along with the company, since I also wanted to see her, but Sasuke, Uchiha chuckled, turning away, trying not to show that he was jealous. And Sasuke too, along with the company. I see. Orochimaru? Shocked Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at the grinning snake. This will take a long time. Sakura looked downcast at the drunk as a skunk Sannins. Two doomed sighs from behind were her answer. Or maybe it's… Naruto looked at his teammates with embarrassment. Well, a bottle. Within a minute the piercing glances were replaced by outstretched hands. Tsunade Senju is appointed the 5th Hokage! The crowd roared jubilantly, and the Merry Trinity had been suffering from a hangover for 5 days already. Orochimaru had fled the company on the way to the village, promising to meet Sakura in a week or two. So, you're leaving already? Yes, but don't forget, this time we will save everyone. The gaze of blue eyes met emerald and black ones. That's right. Sasuke allowed himself a weak smile. Don't worry, Konoha, the calm won't last long. Art is an explosion. Art is eternal beauty. Explosion. Ah. Deidara-senpai. Shut up, Toby. Yes at % and $#. Dash dollar hashtag at percent dollar and percent. Dash percent already at percent and hashtag and percent. Shut up, Hayden. Go at and dash dollar, Kakuzu. This is exactly what Trinity hears almost every hour. Nagato-san. No, Naruto. The leader of this organization shook his head in a martyr manner, making it clear that he would not calm them down. Conan-san. Don't ask. A tired voice came from somewhere on the couch. It was understandable. Conan always calms down quarreling Akatsuki. And this is not an easy task. They're acting like children. Sakura rolled her eyes. Sasuke sighed heavily, looking sadly at the tomato. What's going on? About 6 months after Naruto and Jiraiya left Konoha, Sasuke and Sakura, according to a well-thought-out plan, set out to see Naruto, who by that time had said goodbye to his godfather, saying that he would return to the village in 3 years. And then, Trinity, following the same plan, moved to Akatsuki. There they managed to convince Nagato and Conan, showing their memories of the war, presenting them as a possible development of events. And Uzumaki meanwhile set Tobi's brains straight. Zetsu was killed the next day. They did not disband the organization, but they changed their goals. They introduced Tobi, who, by the way, was still fooling around. And then they introduced Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura, saying that they would be with them for about 2.5 years. Overall, it was fun. Hello, Aniki. How are you doing, Sasuke? Well, that's good. Itachi first raised an eyebrow, as if to say, like in the company of S-rank apostates, that's good. Then, apparently he remembered one specific blonde and all questions disappeared. And how are you? Itachi-san. I knew you were here. I felt you would come. Kisame burst into the room, with tears of happiness in his eyes, and hugged the stunned Uchiha, who did not have time to jump back from the shock. Well, I guess I'll go. Sasuke, no less shocked, slipped out the door. For the first time, the Uchiha brothers' mask of calm and indifference cracked. Kakuzu Hayden. I am giving you an urgent S-rank mission that you must complete as quickly as possible. What mission? Kakuzu narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Buy ramen. What? It seemed like this was the first time these two were in complete agreement with each other. You should buy ramen. More of it. But, Hayden began, because Kakuzu couldn't get over the shock. His money was being spent on some ramen. No objections accepted, the leader snapped imperiously. From the corner of the room, a terrible howl could be heard, in which the word, ramen, could be discerned. After a few seconds, the crying stopped. Uzumaki, and it was him, began to rush around the room, furiously calling ramen to answer him. After half a minute, he blushed a little, quickly pulled a flower in a pot from the windowsill, and shyly held it out to the air in front of him, mumbling something about how he didn't mind marrying sweet ramen, if he didn't mind. Kakuzu and Hayden, who were watching this, seemed to understand the situation they were in and quickly left, leaving a pale Nagato alone with Naruto in the room. If they didn't bring ramen, it was unlikely that there would be anything left of the shelter. And Kurama watched his Jinchuriki with superstitious horror, trying not to fall into hysterics again from the strangeness of the situation. And we don't say, goodbye. We say see you later. Naruto finished his speech, with tears in his eyes. It seemed that everyone in Akatsuki cried, even Sasori, who, being a puppet, could not show emotions. Hayden and Kakuzu, already completely drunk, sat hugging each other and sobbed their eyes out. Kisame, in a fit of melancholy, almost strangled a fish from his aquarium. Deidara was so upset that he sat on the floor and hugged his knees, pulling them up to his chest. The strangest thing is, he didn't even push away Tobi, who hugged Senpai, sobbing. Conan, in a fit of emotion, buried her face in Nagato's chest. He hugged Conan, silently sobbing, remembering all those happy days that they spent together with the Trinity. Sasuke, who seemed much sadder and more emotional than usual, hugged Sakura, who was squeezing him in her arms. I think we'll meet again. Naruto started sobbing now, and wanted to go down into Kurama's subconscious to hug someone too, but the fox hid in the farthest corner, trying to ignore the flood of his habitat, and in a few seconds he built a bunch of barriers so that the persistent Uzumaki wouldn't get in here. Well, Konoha, wait for us. Commentary on Chapter 13 Akatsuki. Sorry for the mistakes and thanks for your support. // Chapter 14 Return The return of the Merry Trinity was spectacular. First, Naruto painted the faces of the sleeping Izumo and Kotetsu. Second, all the streets and houses. Third, the shinobi who came into his hands. And the inscription on the Hokage's faces. "The Merry Trinity has returned," clearly hinted at the perpetrators of this deed. While Tsunade sighed heavily and tried to stop her twitching eye, Hiruzen, who had already relaxed, hurriedly bought groceries and hurried to his home to hide. As it turned out, during the absence of Konoha, a new Trinity took up the Trinity's case. No, they were not as experienced as the merry ones, but they did not allow them to live in peace in the village. Konohamaru, Moegi and Udan, as students of the most energetic of the Trinity Naruto, decided to take his case upon themselves. They couldn't do much, but they caused problems. A lot. In honor of this, Uzumaki decided to reward the boys for their efforts. Naturally, with ramen. Within a month of Team 7's return, Tsunade realized why the third had rushed to abandon his post and never left the house. Kakashi realized that even after 3 years, his students would take revenge on him for being late, and in the most cruel way by burning the unique, legendary books of the great Jiraiya-sama, called Come, there are rumors. You mean? Yeah. So, it's not a rumor. Naruto smiled as he walked past Sasuke and Sakura. In that case, Sakura sighed and smiled a little, only to hit Uzumaki on the head the next second. I'm glad you finally got it. Sakura-chan. Yee. Was it really that noticeable? The only response was a heavy sigh. Anyway, congratulations to you and Hinata. But Hinata is bigger than you. Okay. Naruto nodded humbly, and then, with shining eyes, he hurried to his newfound girl. Does he really love someone more than ramen? Sasuke's voice was full of doubt. Apparently. Haruna looked in surprise as Naruto ran past Ichiraku ramen without even looking at him. Gaara. I'm glad to see you too, Naruto, but that's no reason to hang on me. Yes, nodded Uzumaki, clearly not listening to his friend. Now let's go eat ramen. You have to try it. The most delicious one is at Ichiraku ramen, and you're lucky that I'm going with you. They'll give us the most delicious ramen of all possible. But, Naruto, not listening to objections and completely ignoring attempts to escape from the grip, dragged his friend to the best, in his opinion, place, constantly praising the divine food. Temari and Kankuro, who were accompanying Gaara, were in shock and began to follow the blonde man by inertia, barely understanding what was going on. I knew it! Sakura rolled her eyes. Sasuke chuckled in agreement, taking a bite of his tomato and following his brother to enjoy ramen with his favorite vegetable and new taste, and the only one the Uchiha could tolerate. Sakura sighed bitterly. Unfortunately, apple ramen hasn't been invented yet. Boo-ha-ha-ha-ha! Boo-ha-ha! Kurama, is everything okay? Naruto asked worriedly. I feel better than ever. And after a few seconds he quickly added. After the confinement, of course. And don't look at me like that. The fox was indignant, looking at Uzumaki who appeared in his subconscious. Kurama, Naruto began in a kindly voice, and only an hour later the demon would realize that this is how psychiatrists address mentally unstable patients. You're laughing strangely at 3-3 in the morning, and you see, Kurama, this is not normal. I'm just happy. If you haven't forgotten, today I pulled all my chakra from that boy's hand Sora, I think, and now I feel more complete than before. But Naruto was no longer listening to him, but was actively trying to subdue the cracked picture of his world. He certainly expected that the fox would be happy, but he couldn't even imagine that it would manifest itself like this. Do you understand? The Ninetales finally finished his speech. Uzumaki, still not having recovered from his friend's sudden revelations, simply nodded, and a satisfied Kurama, smiling, fell asleep, forcing Naruto to go into the astral plane again. Commentary on Chapter 14 Return. I think in a couple of chapters it will be the end. Upside down face. Sorry for the mistakes and thanks for your support. // Chapter 15 Shimura Danzo Sometimes the Uchiha get stuck, and like the Uzumaki, they can quickly change their mood. Only unlike the red-haired ones, they do it secretly, without changing their usual facial expression. Sasuke was not spared this fate either. He thought about something for a long time, sighed heavily and finally, a little capriciously, demanded from Sakura and Naruto. No, not tomatoes. Although, those too, but after expressing his first demand. Namely, to kill Danzo. The plan was for the Trinity to infiltrate the root base, get past the ANBU undetected, break into Shimura's office, and kill him. Several times, but who cares? But when did everything ever go according to plan for Team Number 7? That's right, only if after that very plan, a complete screw-up occurs, let's say. In general, the Vesiaski coped with the first 3 points in a jiffy, but they got stuck on the fourth. Mainly, even more because of Naruto than because of Danzo. The thing is, Shimura was somehow different. Uzumaki, who could feel emotions, could say with certainty that now he was more sincere, or something. And his diplomatic soul, although Naruto actively denied this fact, despite all the persuasions of Sasuke, Sakura and Kurama, simply could not tolerate an attack on this man until they talked. Danzo agreed to talk. Oh, he just doesn't know yet that Naruto can tire a person out with just his chatter as if they had been fighting non-stop for 9 hours at the peak of their abilities. But Sakura and Sasuke, sitting doomedly in the corner of the office, know it very well. Naruto walked out of the office with satisfaction, ignoring his teammates who were wearily following behind him. As it turned out from a long conversation, at the end of which Shimura already wanted to hang himself, he had been under surveillance since he was about 20 years old. This was done by the notorious and already nailed Zetsu. In order to be able to pull the strings and control the Uchiha clan, he needed a pawn with sufficient status in Konoha and at least a little dislike for this clan. And Shimura Danzo was ideal for this role. Naturally, after Zetsu's death, control over Danzo was lost, but the personality that had controlled this body for so long did not disappear, but simply began to gradually change to match Shimura's true feelings. Therefore, the old man did not arouse suspicion. Simply put, the injured party here is Danzo, who was simply controlled. After these revelations, Uchiha lost his desire to take revenge, and he languidly ate a tomato and thoughtfully stared at the opposite wall. That's why Shimura stayed alive, and a happy and terribly satisfied Naruto happily walked home. Shimura Danzo didn't understand why just the mention of Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha made his friend twitch nervously, start stuttering, and abruptly change the subject. After they returned to the village, he seemed to have begun to understand the reason for this behavior. However, Shimura did not find their actions so categorical. When they burst into his office, Danzo was surprised. He was even more surprised when the Jinchuriki boy decided to talk to him. At that time, he did not pay due attention to the doomed faces of the Uchiha and the girl, but he should have. After 5 hours of eating away at his brain, there's no other way to call it, Danzo finally understood his friend's attitude towards the trio, as they called them. The cheerful ones. He heard a quiet addition to what was said in the form of Saya, but stubbornly convinced himself that it was a glitch. Most likely, from overwork, yes. Danzo Shimura thought for a long time. In the end, he decided that he was too old for the titles of head of ANBU, NE, and Hokage, and dumping all his responsibilities on the shoulders of the 5th Hokage, he packed his things and went to visit Hiruzen. Most likely forever. Let any other shinobi take his place, Shimura was sure that Tsunade would choose a worthy replacement for him. Even if it was an Uchiha. The main thing was to stay away from the Trinity. Commentary on Chapter 15 Shimura Danzo. Sorry for the mistakes and thanks for your support. // Chapter 16 Meeting of the 5 Kage A week after the conversation with Danzo, Naruto was already thinking hard. Remembering the events of the past future and realizing that there would be no war, but peace between the villages had to be established somehow, otherwise something worse than war could happen. Naruto shared his thoughts with his friends. All four began to look for ways to solve the problem. And Uzumaki realized that it was better to think on a full stomach. And went to Ichiraku Ramen. Stop, you little bastards! Erase everything you've drawn on the walls. Wash it yourself. I'll complain about you to Fifth Sama, she'll give you a fitting punishment, hooligans. Naruto, who was going to Ichiraku, was watching this scene. And if he didn't care much about the salesman chasing the children, then Uzumaki was worried about these children, who were his students. Konohamaru, and it was he with his loyal friends, did not lose his head. His eye caught Naruto, who was watching the chase, and his brain immediately came up with a sensible thought. And I'll complain to my brother Naruto. Surprisingly, the phrase worked. No one wanted to get it from the strong, stubborn, and incredibly vengeful Trinity, who in a short time became famous almost throughout the entire Land of Fire. All three were called demons, and the fact that there was one Jinchuriki among them had nothing to do with it. This very fact was even erased, after the active terrorization of Konoha by the Merry Ones. Now they were considered simple children, if they can be considered as such, with a rich imagination, vengefulness, and a desire to bring chaos to the village. In general, the one chasing stopped, glanced at the already commanded team, spat discontentedly, and went back. Naruto smiled as usual. At 32, smile and gave his student a thumbs up. The student repeated the smile and mirrored the movement, and ran on. And a satisfied Naruto headed to his favorite ramen, filled with pride for his students. Ramen had a truly miraculous effect on Uzumaki, because he came up with a plan that wasn't brilliant or well thought out, but still a plan. And even though its implementation depended on sheer luck and the reaction of other shinobi, which was completely unpredictable, Sasuke and Sakura agreed to this idea, for lack of other options. Kurama could only bang his head against the tree he had been sleeping under before hearing his Jinchuriki's plan. And although the plan was indeed good, and probably even the best in this situation, Naruto's naivety was astounding. However, what can you expect from a guy who once proposed to a ramen? So why did you gather us here, Hokage? The impatient AI immediately got down to business. If only he knew what Tsunade had to go through to achieve this. And the reason was team number 7, or to be more precise, one specific Naruto. It all started about 2 weeks ago, when Tsunade was full of strength and nerves. The Merry Ones, having come up with something, decided to ask Senju to call a 5 Kage summit. Tsunade naturally refused to do this. And then it all started. Naruto appeared literally everywhere the Hokage was and pestered her with persuasion and requests, as it seemed to the 5th, around the clock. But Tsunade was stubborn and didn't want to give in so easily. So she started drinking sake, convincing herself that Uzumaki was her hallucination. But Glitch himself didn't want to give in either. To tell the truth, he even tried to bribe the 5th, offering in exchange for the assembly not to joke about the villagers for a month or 2. But even then Tsunade did not agree. And Naruto continued to persistently beg the Hokage. And so, 2 weeks later, the 5th was so fed up that she gave in. And Uzumaki happily recounted to his teammates the funny incidents that happened in the Hokage's office. And how he scared the poor genin. They wanted to talk to you. Senju sighed and waved her hand wearily, allowing Trinity to appear next to her. Gaara, who recognized Naruto, smiled sincerely and gratefully, and sat down further away. To the other 3 Kage who did not understand anything. Well, now, Naruto started to speak. And when Naruto starts to speak, it becomes easier to set other people's brains straight. After all, they are imbued with Uzumaki's speech. And this is the biggest mistake in their villainous, and not only plan. Commentary on Chapter 16 5 Kage Summit. Sorry for the mistakes and thanks for your support. // Chapter 17 Epilogue Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura sat on the Hokage mountain, admiring the sky. Were they happy? Yes. They were, and how? The plan Naruto came up with 4 years ago worked surprisingly. The Kage, to whom Sasuke showed the memory of the war, presenting them as a possible development of events, albeit not immediately, but concluded a peace in which all shinobi, and samurai too, now live. Civilians after this advanced in technology and trade, the world again moved to a new stage of evolution. In fact, a lot had happened in those 4 years. They met Sai and Yamato when Naruto injured his arm during training, again, by the way, and Kakashi was standing nearby, wanting to get revenge for the burned books. A botched technique sent both of them to the hospital for more than a week, despite Naruto's vaunted regeneration. Danzo and Hiruzen, without all this intrigue and political dirt, became kinder, now really looking like ordinary grandfathers. The root of A and B was placed on the shoulders of Itachi, who re-educated them all. From dark fighters without emotions, they turned into kind nannies. If you mess around with little children from an orphanage, then you can become even more so, and if you consider that they also looked after animals, many of which were still small. Jinchuriki were considered normal people, even a little heroes. And Naruto managed to talk to all the Bija. Akatsuki completely retrained into a good organization, sometimes visiting their friends in Konoha. Often the initiator of such ideas was Kisame, who missed Itachi. Obito almost forgave Kakashi, and now they began to copy Naruto and Sasuke in relation to each other. That is, you want to hit and humiliate, but if trouble they will always help. Jiraiya finally achieved his happiness and married Tsunade. She, by the way, is actively preparing to hand over her post, although she has not yet decided who exactly, Kakashi or Obito. The legendary Team 7 became heroes. No, there were no wars or anything like that, but they saved and cured many, exposed many as spies. They completed many missions. In general, they honestly earned their title. Although they still didn't stop joking. Naruto and Hinata also had a son, who was named Boruto, in honor of the surviving Neji, Naruto's motivation, and his beloved brother, Hinata's motivation. Neji himself was crazy about his nephew and often stayed to play with him. Sasuke and Sakura had a daughter, Sarada. Itachi, like Neji, often played with her. Only at such moments could a happy smile be seen on the face of the eternally cold Uchiha. Yes, even just at the mention of his niece, Itachi began to glow. Like a light bulb. Kurama often ran around the garden of the newly purchased house, and later almost began to live there. And no, he did not run away from the energetic underage copy of Naruto. Just air and freedom. Yes, that's right. In general, now the Veselyashi can relax. And even though, outwardly, they are the same age as before they got into the past 20, but this time they saved all the people close to them. And did not allow such casualties as there were after the war. And this life became truly happy for them. And their descendants.